The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of KSMQ Public Service Media Incorporated or its assigns.
Welcome to the Heart of the Matter. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. Getting kids off to school, meeting a deadline for a presentation at work. In our daily lives, we don't often spend a great deal of time worrying about the Greeks or the Italians. Do we really care if the Eurozone collapses? On today's program, we'll explore how world economies may in fact impact our region. We'll start by visiting with one Faribault company who is breaking into the world market.
Minnesota is the Silicon Valley of the window industry. Sage makes a product called Sage Glass, and it's an electronically tintable glass. So at the touch of a button, you can change its transmission from a very clear state to a highly tinted state, and then back again, and stopping anywhere in between. So basically you can use it as a heat or light valve for your building. So you can control the amount of heat or light that comes in. So you can manage the thermal and visual comfort in the space. We are just building a high volume manufacturing expansion to our existing facility. And we would like to expand our markets outside of the US through that high volume manufacturing facility. China does not have a product like Sage Glass. And so this gives us an opportunity to export goods made in the US to China. I do think, in a general level, though, it's good to have a balance of trade that isn't too far in one direction over the other. But certainly in terms of glass and glazing, the US has significant technology innovations in this area which has not yet been developed in China. One of the great things Minnesota has going for it is the highly trained, highly educated workforce. It's one of the best things about being here in Minnesota. Also, it's the Minnesotan work ethic, which I guess comes from the farming community. Well, it certainly helps that we have I-35 running through our back door, and the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport is very useful for business traveling. I think our goal is to basically change how people think about glass. And in order to do that, it's not just changing the way people think about glass in North America. So we always thought about it as wanting to promote and sell our product throughout the world. It's just a case of doing it one stage at a time.
While Sage is just getting started, there are companies in our region who have been engaged in world economies for years. Jason Switzer from Vi-Cor joins Katie Clark from the Minnesota Trade Office to illustrate the opportunities and challenges to foreign markets. Katie, you're from the Minnesota Trade Office. Tell us a little bit about what the numbers are for exporting by Minnesota companies.
Sure. Well, in 2010, Minnesota companies exported around $31 billion worth of goods. So 17 billion was manufactured goods, around 10 billion is the service sector, and around 4 billion is our agriculture sector.
Wow, those are some big numbers. Help us put those in perspective a little bit, in percentage-wise, about how many Minnesota companies engage in some type of export.
There are about 8,000 companies across the state that are currently exporting. That's a strong number. Minnesota ranks about 20th among all states for the number exporting. But we know that there are many companies across the state that are not currently exporting that have potential to do so.
That are interested in doing that. All right. Now, Jason, your company actually is engaged in exporting. You're based out of Mason City, Iowa. Tell us a little bit about the type of product that you export in and what led your company to look to foreign markets.
We are a manufacturer of yeast fermentation products for the livestock industry. The company name is Vi-Cor. We're located in Mason City, Iowa. And I think what led our company to export our products worldwide was the ability to gain market share and to gain a competitive advantage in the international marketplace.
Okay, and part of your responsibilities is actually to travel and to develop those markets. Tell us a little bit about what that involves. I mean, what do you do?
That is correct. I am currently the Europe and Middle East Business Manager for Vi-Cor, which allows me to travel to Europe, the Middle East, and in the past I have helped develop some business in China and the Southeastern Asia region. I do travel quite often.
All right, Katie, are there hot spots that Minnesota, Iowa businesses are really kind of targeting because of the things that we either produce or grow or develop?
Absolutely. We always look at where is the greatest demand for Minnesota products and try to pursue those markets. Canada is our top export market. About a third of Minnesota's exports go right across the border to Canada. Ease of entry with that market, similar language.
And we don't always think about that as an export, do we? Always think it has to cross an ocean. But, but Canada's a huge purchaser.
Canada's huge. Our second largest market is China. And we've seen exports increase about 20 to 30% each quarter to China. So very quickly growing market, growing middle class, a lot of demand for Minnesota products.
And an interesting turn, a lot of times when we buy consumer goods in the store, it says made in China. We always think the exports, or that they're imports, coming in.
Absolutely.
But, all right, so we're doing a good business sending them out. All right, very good. How do you determine which market is the right one to develop? Is it, agriculture products can go anywhere, but a specific manufacturing product may need quite a specific customer. How do you identify who that customer may be? Where do you even begin?
I think the first part of any export market research is to find a market in which you think your products will fit, where you have maybe an ease of market access, because sometimes, for instance, in some countries, international or intellectual property rights are very important, and trademarks, trade names, and a company should be a little weary of where they're first going to market their products based on those barriers of trade that a company will go up against if they enter that market.
And I think that's an excellent response. Within the Minnesota Trade Office, we've identified 15 priority export markets for Minnesota. We want to take a strategic approach to getting to know those top 15 markets that we think are a good match for our industries that we have across the state, and really try to have deeper relationships in each of those markets to identify international distributors, know the foreign commercial service that's located in that country very well, so we can help direct companies. We still service any market that a company may call in and have a question about, but we do like that targeted approach.
So it may be easier to widen the breadth if you've got the depth already.
Absolutely.
Okay. Jason, your company exports to Europe, which we read a lot about, hear a lot about.
We do.
They're in a bit of a turmoil over there, not really sure what their future will hold. How does that impact? How are businesses right here at home being impacted by that turmoil, or have you not seen it yet because there's still so many questions out there?
I don't think that our company has seen the effects of the Eurozone, so to say, with our products in our company. However, there may be some substantial effects in the near future. What's nice about doing international trade is that if one economy is down, then you can offset those lower sales to another foreign market that's actually has a better economy.
Okay. So with your global perspective, what are some emerging markets that are opportunities for businesses that are perhaps a little uncertain of that European situation?
I think there's always an opportunity in the emerging markets, such as Northern Africa, in Russia, and Ukraine. Again, it depends on the type of products and services that you offer, because for us, we're in the agricultural business, and that may be different than somebody else that's selling some kind of medical devices somewhere else in other parts of the world. So I think it really depends on the type of product or service that you're offering.
Okay. Katie, in your office you have folks that will help people through this process. How much of it is, Jason mentioned cultural as being a piece of this. Do you offer language training? Do you offer courses in here are the customs, you know, you don't shake hands, you do other greetings? I mean, how do people navigate that?
We do offer a wide variety of training programs. So we have training specific to new to export companies who are just starting to explore, but then we do have trainings like what you mentioned on cultural protocol. We serve as the Office of Protocol for the state of Minnesota, so we are responsible in trying to help companies understand how to best do business in that market. Just yesterday we had our China Practicum, which is a full day training program on China, and about 2 hours of that training session is dedicated to cultural awareness and how to do business effectively in that market.
All right. And Jason, when you're taking a look at making these trips, I mean, when you do a prospecting trip to Europe or other places, do you have customers in mind? Are you cold calling once you get there? I mean, what is the process for even identifying specific companies that you may wish to sell?
It's a very good question, and it's a question that probably a lot of export companies are looking for a right answer to. And my answer to that would be a lot of times I think it boils down to having a very good network in the international community. Not only that, but there's certain resources that you can use, such as the Minnesota Trade Office. I currently sit on the board of directors with the Minnesota Global Trade Association, the MGTA, which is based out of St. Paul, as well as the International Traders of Iowa, based out of Des Moines. And I think having the ability to network with those types of organizations, as well as utilizing the tools from the Minnesota Trade Office, that you can find ways to generate some leads in those countries in which you want to export. A lot of it is online research. There's certain programs through the Minnesota Trade Office. We have a program through the Iowa Department of Economic Development in Iowa that can kind of match make you with another company that's interested in your products. So there's different avenues for that, but I think mostly it's finding the right, whether it's a distributor or an end user, through a state office or through an international organization.
Okay. Still about building relationships, isn't it?
It's all about building relationships.
You have to be very well connected in the international community. It always is a plus.
Yeah. I've seen that, you know, with the use of the internet and email and Skype, it's made international business so much easier to do, but nothing replaces traveling to that market and doing face-to-face business and creating relationships on the ground.
Katie, in this time of kind of economic uncertainty in overseas markets as well as domestically, what advice do you give to companies? Is the time right for them to explore this, or is it better when kind of the domestic market is strong and it gives them a little cushion to explore foreign markets? Is there a right or wrong time in this economic situation to explore foreign markets?
Well, I think the key is what was said earlier, is that it's all about market diversification. So the right time is whatever's the right time for that individual business. We really encourage businesses to create a strategic plan, make exporting part of that strategic plan. There are companies that receive an inquiry through their website and then become an exporter because of that one inquiry. But we really think a thoughtful strategic approach to exporting is the best bet. And we can help companies create that export plan if they need assistance and need help with international research. But we know that companies that export pay higher wages, higher salaries. Companies that export fared better through this past recession. So we encourage all small and mid-sized companies across the state to be considering exporting as a part of their strategic growth plan.
Okay, very good. Well, certainly sounds like there are plenty of opportunities out there. Thanks for sharing your experience with your company, and appreciate you taking time to come visit with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On the flip side of exports, many entities in our region are promoting buy local campaigns, from food to retail to a new emphasis on business-to-business connections. How do we define local, and do these campaigns really work? John Wade from the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce and David Swenson from Iowa State University join us to sort out what can be achieved by buying locally. So today we're talking about buy local. And kind of the flip side, our earlier conversation on the program was about exports and selling to other countries and foreign markets. But really right here in southern Minnesota and northern Iowa, there's a lot of business that happens right here and kind of in our own region. And what I want to do though is start out by getting a definition of what it means to buy local. And Professor Swenson is joining us from Iowa State University. Professor, this is a field of study for you. How do you define buying locally?
Well, the idea of buying locally fits very, very well with our standard definition of how economies grow and how income gets made. Here's how it works. If you're a regional economy, first of all, we consume from one another. We buy and sell to one another. That's part of how incomes are made in a region. The next way that incomes are made in a region primarily is that we produce more than we can consume locally, so we export it. So money comes from the outside. Unfortunately, we can't buy everything we need locally, or oftentimes don't know that we can buy it locally, so we have to depend on imports. Well, imports makes money leave the region, and when money leaves the region, it has a hard time coming back. So what we've learned over the years, and we've known this for decades and decades and decades, but if you can keep money in your economy, keep it in a little bit longer by substituting a local purchase for one that occurred outside of your economy, you have two things. One, you have the money in your economy, and two, you get something called a multiplier effect. And it's the opportunity for that spending to stimulate and support an additional layer of economic activity or two in your regional economy, and it helps support. Now, the reason buy local is important, and learning how to characterize this, is because if you lose spending, if you leak spending, if your spending is migrating to another place, that same multiplier works, only you put a negative sign in front of it. And so local commercial leaders, businesses, economic development leadership all know full well how important it is to try to maintain the sales in your region that you can maintain.
All right, and a lot of different business categories, definitions for buy local at a Chamber of Commerce, and especially in Rochester, you guys are kind of a regional center, and local can be relative. How would you guys describe local?
Well, I think that not only do we look at the region or the metropolitan statistical area, but more importantly, we looked a few years ago at buying local. And what we realized is, and we had the University of Minnesota do the analysis, with due respect to my friends at Iowa State, and what we basically understood was this, that if businesses could shift just 5% of the purchases they're making outside the market, so of the purchases they're making outside the market, if they would shift just 5% of those purchases, we could grow 2,200 jobs in our area.
And 5% doesn't seem like a whole lot.
It doesn't seem like a lot. And we had businesses actually making those commitments and making sizable shifts locally. But again, we realized that it was very real. That buying local not only is easier and feels better in some cases and other things, but has a dramatic impact on the local economy.
You raise an important distinction too. You're talking about businesses making that decision as well. Often buy local campaigns are seen as a retail promotion.
You know, clearly as a Chamber of Commerce, we were looking at a business perspective and what that could do for the local economy. Clearly there are a number of communities around America that run retail buy local campaigns. And they're all good, because it continues to reinforce the point that those are the businesses, and those businesses you go to are the ones that give to the Scouts. And when you drive in your car that you might have bought in the Twin Cities or somewhere else, and you go to that local business and say, could you give me a donation? Some people don't understand there's a very real correlation between those businesses that support their community activities and their purchases.
Professor, your business is research and measuring things. A couple questions. How hard or easy is it to measure the results or the efforts of a buy local campaign? And can you measure, as John is saying, that social piece that comes with purchasing locally?
Well, how you measure it, we begin initially, and this would have been how his friends at the University of Minnesota did this. You use what's called an input-output model, and you try to sort out what you think your businesses and your households are buying locally versus what they have to import. And once you figure out what that is, then you figure out how well does that match with the regional economy, because you can't buy local stuff that's not produced locally. So you sort it out in layers, and then once you do it, you get exactly the kind of economic impacts that John mentioned. You get some sort of potential possible gain, whether it's a 4% or a 5% or a 10% goal, you're going to get those. I want to emphasize 2 points. First off, he's very, very right. You have to begin with the business community. More than half of what's bought within an economy over the course of a year, whether it's inputs into production or services into the provision of any kind of business, it's purchased by business. Households are a bit player in our economy. We have the rest of our economy. So we have to talk to the business community and get them on board and talking about this. In addition, the things that they buy oftentimes have higher multipliers. They're more valuable. They maybe have better linkages to the regional economy. And so I see it both as a communication, a leadership opportunity, and a community building opportunity that has nothing but positive consequences.
Okay, nothing but positive consequences. One of my questions is there a downside to buy local? We have some smaller communities. John happens to be from more of a regional center. If everybody in Albert Lea bought local, if everyone in Harmony purchased locally, or Preston or Hayfield, that wouldn't necessarily make Rochester the wonderful regional powerhouse that it is. Is there a downside at all to buying local?
I don't think there's any downside at all.
Okay.
We want people to support their communities. And frankly, for the Rochester area, we have 40,000 people a day come into that city to work. It is essential that their communities are strong also. So yes, while I certainly appreciate that when they do shop outside of their area, if we have choices or selections that they don't have, I think the professor might agree that if they can't find it in perhaps a smaller community, that they go to a regional center nearby. Because the benefit is still much more real and much more better realized than it would be to turning on your computer and ordering that from New York.
You can just move to the territory of all online sales represent a net multiplier driven loss from local sales. And so even if you might want to have a little bit of parochial tension, that's one thing. But if you're able to minimize your online sales, minimize your out-of-state sales, again, you're still enhancing your regional economy. You're still enhancing your local economy. Everybody can get on the same side of that conversation.
All right. Are there distinctions to be made? And we'll talk retail for just a second. Some people say, well, I buy local, but I don't buy big box. I avoid those stores because I don't see them as local. Yet big box stores employ large numbers of people in our region. Is there a distinction to be made there or not?
I think the professor might have a more learned answer to that. We count them all. And we encourage people because there are jobs there. So we don't discriminate against those because they might be based somewhere else. But the fact of the matter is, even a large box that employs 800 people in our area employs 800 people in our area. So those are the same people you're standing along the soccer fields watching a game with that are working at companies that might be based somewhere else but operate and make an investment in our areas as well. So we don't discriminate against that. I happen to prefer, perhaps in some cases, smaller stores or independent stores or stores that I happen to know the owners or otherwise. But I absolutely understand how we shop as Americans. And if that can be done locally, we don't discriminate against those stores.
And I would validate that point of view. I'm quite agnostic about this. This is a value judgment. The economy really doesn't care who owns the business. What we really care is where we're buying, how many jobs are supported. Now, at the small area level, at the small community level, this is a big issue, and I have to be very, very careful how I address this issue. That yes, local ownership is important, and the small mom and pop stores are something that we have to support, but it's not necessarily more valuable to support the mom and pop stores. And so I get caught between the value judgment and the quantified conclusions.
All right, let's close with a quick remark about this business to business. John, your organization, the Chamber of Commerce, is working to get businesses to buy locally and to explore more of those opportunities. How do you help them find things? How do you help them source goods? Is there an exchange that's going to take place? Tell us a little bit more about how you do
the program is called Market Force, and if we can, for Dave's sake, we'll think of a large I, a capital I. And at the lower end of that tier would be small businesses that would be certified to be able to sell to large businesses. We have a commitment from the Mayo Clinic. We are going to talk to other large consumers, businesses in this region who could identify what they need to purchase and what they would like to purchase, and then through that database connect those smaller businesses with those larger businesses, because the growth of small business nationwide is critical. Most of the jobs in America are growth is going to come from small business, not large business. We've got a Chamber of Commerce with nearly 1,400 members, half of which have 4 or fewer employees.
Wow. Okay.
But many of them are very capable of selling to large organizations if we could build that pipeline to get them there. And that's what Market Force is about.
All right, great. John, thank you. Professor Swenson, thank you. It's been an enlightening discussion. Appreciate your appearance.
Thank you.
It's clear that we live in a global marketplace and opportunities surround us. As our guests have noted, businesses who accurately identify their customer, whether it's their neighbor or someone halfway around the world, bring a healthier balance to their business. And it will be exciting to see the results of some of the new initiatives like the business-to-business pipeline John mentioned taking place in our area. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. Please join us next time on The Heart of the Matter, where we will continue to explore the issues that matter most to you.